Well, let's talk about all of this now with Khanya Vilakazi, political analyst. Khanya, good morning to you and welcome. You heard so many views expressed this morning alone, many more over the weekend, and a range of others since the elections happened. The result was announced and all of this horse trading and sort of deal mongering sort of kicked in to earnest. And I guess one of the questions I want to start off with this morning is, given the threshold, the majority threshold that the ANC would probably want to seek, would it be in its interest to just seek a number or a partnership with the party that can take it over the 200-seat mark in order to secure that majority? Or would it be in its interest to go even beyond that, even include other parties that take it far beyond the territory of its majority to create at least the concept that it is not just talking to another monolithic party or other parties which have bigger blocks, but is truly representative of what the spirit of a government of national unity should be?
I think the ANC suggesting a government of national unity, it's in itself understanding that they have lost the elections and there's no way for them to govern without seeking help of other political parties. Now, when you open it up for a government of national unity, the question will always be what ideological perspectives are these political parties coming from, and how are they going to advance the agenda in which the ANC wants to set forth. Now, it doesn't make sense to include everybody in the government of national unity, hence why a lot of pundits have been speaking about just a straight-up coalition of parties that are like-minded with the ANC to continue on what they call the National Democratic Revolution in South Africa, excluding those parties that they are ideologically against in any way and every facet.
All right, so given that criterion then, which would be the obvious choices for the ANC?
Well, the obvious choices for the ANC could be a combination of 3 or 2 other parties, mainly the EFF, the MK, and the PA, in order to get the 2/3 majority for any political, any constitutional change if required. However, all these 2 or 3 parties, both the EFF and the MK, have asked quite a lot from the ANC. And I think it's incumbent of the ANC to realize the position that it's in and need to succumb to it for the stability of the democratic process.
So the MK party has confirmed engagements with the ANC, they say, with an open mind. The ANC has also confirmed it had approached the new kingmakers in the MKP with the view of finding common ground on the coalition talks. The DA has also publicly agreed to form a government of national unity with the ANC, the EFF and IFP as possible parties, but there are mixed views on which way to go now. As you say, there are a couple of potential matchups that all of these parties can look at. Even the smaller ones can try and get everybody in their camp to reach a majority of their making. But there are going to be a number of trade-offs, especially if the ideological similarities are not there. So it's going to have to be a quid pro quo, a giving and a taking of different positions, and hoping that ultimately, well, from a South African perspective, that everything is done in the best interests of the country. What should South Africans be looking to in this moment of uncertainty where, well, every party, by what we can see, you know, as late as this morning, are playing their cards and keeping their cards very close to their chests?
I think most South Africans wish and hope that egos are set aside for the betterment of all South Africans. I think we will all agree that most political parties, when they campaign on the idea of a better and prosperous South Africa. Now, with that as a principle of moving forward, I think that most South Africans ought to see this happening. A lot of people have been saying, why are these discussions going to be made behind closed doors and not in an open and public platform? You'd remember that the government of national unity that held from 1994 was something that was agreed upon in the 1993 Constitution, Clause 88. But now this is something new. So before we even agree as society to say we are allowing our political parties that we voted for to actually be part of this government of national unity. But what are they compromising, and what are they wanting in return of being part of this government of national unity? Let us see that as the public, and let it be as transparent as possible.
Well, look, Khanya, everything has to be settled by next Monday. This is when a special sitting where MPs are to be sworn in by the Chief Justice should be held. By then, and then they have to select a president and a speaker. So this clock is ticking fast. Are we making enough progress?
Well, a lot can happen in a 24-hour cycle in politics. I know you would agree with me there. However, I think the biggest problem lies with the ANC. Is the ANC willing to sway in former President Cyril Ramaphosa and then not be able to push him through the threshold of being a president? That is something that the ANC is fearing above all. But secondly, when you look at what are the other trade-offs, because at the ultimate, it's only the president that can actually determine cabinet and who gets what through cabinet. But with that, we then realize that if a certain political party is not happy with the allocated cabinet seats, they can just rush for a vote of no confidence and then remove the president with the support of other political parties. Now, that will definitely destabilize the democratic process in itself.
Well, let's go to this other question in the air. The Umkhonto weSizwe Party now legally instructing the Secretary to Parliament, Xolile George, and the Chief Justice to refrain from convening the sitting of both houses of Parliament until its grievances over the results of the national and provincial elections are heard and then ruled upon. We know they have 58 seats in the National Assembly. Parliament as well standing its ground following this instruction and saying it doesn't agree with their interpretation of Section 46 of the Constitution, and they are going to go ahead with the gathering as planned and bound by the law. So where does this sit now, and how credible is this threat of actually stopping things from going forward?
Well, I think it's a legal perspective, Iman, and I don't want to be misquoted in future about it. However, I think it's very prudent to actually get legal counsel to actually sit down and understand what will be the potential ramifications if either the MK is correct, if they continue on with the sitting for next week, Monday. And I think that's the best possible way. Maybe a former Chief Justice, both Ngobo or Mogoeng can weigh in on the procedures in terms of the legalities that might happen if the sitting does sit.
Well, let's end with this then, Khanya. We know, and we've talked about it in news this morning, UDM leader General Bantu Holomisa writing to CJ Raymond Zondo asking him to, to convene this meeting, or for a retired judge to convene a meeting with all 18 political parties that are represented in Parliament. We know the EFF says it's a terrible idea, and we've heard from several experts and commentators since this call was made about their view on how this should be handled. But what it does represent is the unhappiness or dissatisfaction with the number of parties for the situation we are in. I don't know, again, you've been careful to not make any sort of legal pronouncements, but what are your thoughts on managing the chasms that exist between different political parties towards the constitution of a government of national unity? And although we don't have anything to rely on in terms of precedent from a South African perspective, barring that one sort of stint in the early formation of our democracy, but how badly could this affect the work of Parliament going forward if there's so much dissent and discontent?
Well, I think it will lead
All right, did we lose we lost Khanya Vilakazi there. We'll see if we can get him back just before I go to the headlines, but we're trying to kind of sketch forward what the likely scenarios are that will face South Africa in terms of these power brokering arrangements, and whether we can credibly, whether all of those political parties can credibly create a government of national unity that, with stability and clarity of mind, forge the future of the country, especially coming from the context as we have. Okay, so we don't have Khanya back. We'll leave it there for now and thank him very much for... Khanya, I do have you back. So final comment in response to that question.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a circus getting all 18 political parties in one space. And I think it's uncalled for. The only place where such discussions are hatched out is in a post-electoral conflict season, where we've seen it we've seen it in Zimbabwe, we've seen it in Kenya, where only political parties come together to discuss such issues after electoral violence has happened after elections. So I think this is a misfire by the general because it's unneeded in this current form.